Welcome to Matt's Financial and Geopolitical from Frontier. Thank you for taking time to stop by. I suppose everyone's looking forward to Christmas, as am I. And on that note, I'd like to read a poem by W.B. Yeats, the Magi. Now, as at all times, I can see in the mind's eye, in their stiff painted clothes, the pale, unsatisfied ones appear and disappear in the blue depth of the sky, with all their ancient faces like rain-beaten stones, and all their helms of silver hovering side by side, and all their eyes still fixed, hoping to find once more, being by Calvary's turbulence unsatisfied, the uncontrollable mystery of the bestial floor. Macro thoughts, the year in business, has a huge number of graphs and wonderful perspective as to what actually happened all year. I like this photograph of the bullfighter Jose Thomas performing during the last bullfight at La Monumental on September 25th, 2011 in Barcelona. And then I returned to Don DeLillo, whose Americana, which I think was his first book I'm reading. The love of minds should last beyond lives. I do think we can connect novelists and terrorists here. In a repressive society, a writer can be deeply influential, but in a society that's filled with glut and repetition and endless consumption, the act of terror may be the only meaningful act. People who are in power make their arrangements in secret, largely as a way of maintaining and furthering that power. People who are powerless make an open theatre of violence. True terror is a language and a vision. There is a deep narrative structure to terrorist acts, and they infiltrate and alter consciousness in ways that writers used to aspire to. The world is full of abandoned meanings, and then film is more than the 20th century art. It's another part of the 20th century mind. It's the world seen from inside. We've come to a certain point in the history of film. If a thing can be filmed, the film is implied in the thing itself. Once went to the Ivy with Nishat, who I've been married to 20 years yesterday, and took her to the Ivy when we were first courting. This is a photograph from Bloomberg. The bar in the center of the room at the Ivy is one of the best places to sit. We can't get outside the aura. We're part of the aura. We're here, we're now. There's always more to it. This is what history consists of. It is the sum total of the things they aren't telling us. Political reflections. There has been no public comment on Mr. Hersh's claims, which would amount to a case of US military chiefs undermining the civilians' leadership of President Obama and his administration. It is, as I concluded today, an extraordinary situation to which I've already alerted everybody. Let me put up a photograph of President Obama, Ashton Carter, and the chief of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. A Chinese Coast Guard vessel number 31239 apparently has sailed in the East China Sea near the disputed isles known as Senkaku in Japan and Diaoyu in China. Up a photograph, and it remains pretty tense and fractious around that part of the world. The Iraqi army is trying to retake Ramadi. Ramadi is located in a fertile, irrigated alluvial plain within Iraq's Sunni Triangle, and really the insurgency that took place in Ramadi was because the policy of de-Ba'athification, the disbandment of the Iraqi army implemented by the United States following the 2003 invasion of Iraq hit Ramadi particularly hard. Following the withdrawal of US and coalition forces in 2011, Ramadi was contested by Iraq and the Islamic State of Iraq in the Levant during the ongoing Iraqi insurgency. On the 15th of May 2015, Ramadi was captured by ISIL, and now the Iraqi army is trying to recapture the same. I put up a photograph of Ramadi and a link to a Vice documentary about the retaking of Ramadi. So very symbolic win, if it turns out to be as such. UK government attempting to keep details of secret security pact with Saudi Arabia hidden from the public. In its grounds for refusing to publish details of the memorandum, the Home Office has admitted it contains information relating to the UK's security cooperation with Saudi Arabia. The demonstration of military strength has been a success. This is Bershitsky in Bloomberg View talking about Vladimir Putin. Very interesting. I say have a look at the rest of it. A bird's eye view, though, is more favourable to Putin. His sabre rattling and his willingness to talk and compromise have again made him a player to be reckoned with. He is no longer being shunned. Even US President Barack Obama, who made no secret of his personal dislike of Putin, it's visceral, you see it in the body language, finds it necessary to hold regular meetings with him. The Russian leader has carved out an uncomfortable but far from insignificant niche for Russia in the global political landscape. The country's role is disproportionate to its shrinking economic power, and arguably it is sometimes more constructive than it was in better days for the Russian-Western relationship. Back then there was less give and take. On Syria, for example, I did say that he is a geopolitical grandmaster in October, and I said then that he had been on the back foot big time. The body language between President Obama and Putin is also another avenue worthy of study. Obama has a barely concealed, evidently visceral dislike of Putin. You see this in the frozen handshakes and a number of other interactions. And I return to the United Nations General Assembly when Putin set out his stall, and I quote, "I cannot help asking those who have caused the situation, do you realize now what you've done?" And I said he fancies himself a flycatcher in Syria, the fly trap. The speed of execution confirms that Russia is once again a geopolitical actor that will have to be considered. And I said it's a breathtaking rebound. Let me put up some photographs of this. The first one is of Barack Obama and Putin at APEC, when they were not getting along, and you remember Putin took off early. Then you have this one where there's a bit of a rapprochement at the sidelines of the G20. And then you can see in this other photograph, which was at APEC as well, a sort of Putin looking in a very interesting manner at Obama. After years of diplomatic decline, Russia has revived its presence in Africa, with diplomatic missions now established in 49 of the 53 countries in Africa. Talking about Russia's African pivot as a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, Russia is no stranger to Africa's leaders in issues, particularly those that relate to the Security Council agenda. World Economic Forum is Africa winning the war against corruption. Among a downbeat set of findings, Transparency International nevertheless sees room for optimism. There are a few countries in which citizens see low levels of corruption in their public institutions and see corruption as on the wane in their own country. The views of citizens in Botswana, Burkina Faso, Lesotho, and Senegal are particularly positive. Currency markets: Euro 109.22, dollar index 98.28, Japanese yen 121, the figure, Swissy 0.9887, pound 148.40, Aussie 0.72, 0.7233, India rupee 66.255, South Korean won 1172.20, Rial 3.9830, back below 4, Egyptian pound 782.66, and the rand stays resolutely above 15 at 15.1596. Dollar index, I'll put up a one-year chart. My target for the end of 2016 is 110. Have a look at that. It's about 10% higher. Throw in a bit of carry as well. Euro versus the dollar, I think Draghi's running out of ammunition, and that we might have seen a double bottom down there around the 105 level. Commodity markets, the Bloomberg Commodity Index sank 26% on course for its worst year since the global financial crisis in 2008. Let me put up a graph of what these components of the commodity index did over the 12 months. Gold, last trading at 1073, triple digits expected in 2016. Crude oil, $36.60, trying, but it's very fragile to firm up ever so gently. My children are scared. Burundi's deepening human rights crisis by Amnesty International. It is difficult to estimate the overall number of civilians killed by police during the 11th December operations. At least 21 were killed in Nyakabiga, which Amnesty International visited on the 12th of December. At least 12 were killed in Musaga, which Amnesty International visited on 13th December. Killings were also reported in Jabe and Gagara neighborhoods. Political opposition, civil society sources cited much larger numbers of people killed. And I had somebody who came in here to interview me about something else, and he just recently returned from Bujumbura, and he said, Ali Khan, for each death being reported, there are 9 others. That was his theory. Credible reports of mass graves being employed. However, the government's method of disposing of bodies, the climate of fear among much of the population, and the challenging security conditions, with clashes continuing for much of the day, hindered a precise calculation of the death toll. Nonetheless, 11th December was undoubtedly the single most deadly day of violence since the current political unrest began in April 2015. The trend is not good. I wrote about this in May when I spoke about spillover risks. Those risks are spilling over. Mali's government on Monday declared a 10-day state of emergency from midnight after what security sources say follows a series of threats from unnamed jihadist groups. South African all-share bounced 1.2% yesterday. It's back in positive territory marginally for the year, 0.02%. Dollar rand, as I said, you sell it below 15, you look for a move higher. Egyptian pound stuck at 783. Egyptian EGX 30 is down 24.17%. Nigeria issued their budget for 2016. Growth is set to ease to 3.2% this year, the slowest pace since 1999. The government expects it to accelerate to 4.37% in 2016. The deficit will be plugged with 1.84 trillion of borrowing, 900 billion of which will come from international debt markets. The response in the markets was the Nigerian dollar naira forwards hit a 3-month high, rose across the curve by over 2% on Tuesday, and that really is the response. The currency has been under enormous pressure, says Yan Dane at Emerging Market Fund Manager Ashmore. He said Nigeria's plans to spend to make up for losses to the economy from falling oil prices wasn't sustainable. Since Buhari has come in, he has done everything wrong and nothing right. The non-deliverable forward rate, is going to go wider from here, so it doesn't bode well for Nigeria. Something is going to give, and it is surely going to be the Nigerian naira. In January 2015, I said Emefiele's finger in the dike strategy is going to be overwhelmed by a tsunami. It hasn't yet, but it will happen eventually. Holger Scheipitz, who is next after Azerbaijan devalues currency for coping with lower oil. ICBC sees Naira and Middle East pegs at risk. 10th of August, I said the end is nigh for crude oil and oil producers from Caracas to Luanda, from Riyadh to Abuja, who were squealing like pigs and are about to be served up as rations. Nigerian oil share down 22.33% year to date. Nigeria will enforce a December 31st deadline for MTN Group to pay a $3.9 billion fine. Ghana President bans first-class travel for public officials. Surprising it's taken them that long. Ghana Stock Exchange down 12.62% so far this year. Held to ransom, an overview of Mozambique's kidnapping crisis. A silver Mercedes-Benz pulls into the driveway of a luxury beachfront home on Maputo's Avenida Marginal as an electronic security gate begins to close behind the car. 4 men loitering in the street break into a run. One slips past the gate, then another. An old Ford Granada pulls up outside. Seconds later, the driver of the Mercedes, Harichi Akusandas, is hustled at gunpoint into the Ford. One of the men kicks him as he struggles to break free. Witnesses hear a gunshot ring out. The Granada speeds off in the direction of the ocean, makes a sharp left turn onto the Maputo Ring Road. Mozambique's economy is on the rocks. It's been extraordinary, hasn't it? With the currency falling more than 40% against the dollar in the past year, the country's future prospects depend largely on the exploitation of vast reserves of natural gas that have been discovered in the north since 2010. Unchecked, the spate of kidnappings and the continuing stranglehold of criminal networks on the country are likely to have a dire impact on foreign investment and dwindling investor confidence. And funnily enough, 572 days ago, I was at an IMF conference in Maputo called Africa Rising, and I tweeted that day when I took a photograph, as you can see, of the poster. I said, Africa Rising, but no longer in the rising tide floats all boats way it was in 2012 and 2013. I also put up a photograph of the ocean view in Maputo at evening time. Fastjet shares slide as it blames African politics, blamed chaos resulting from the general election in Tanzania, its main hub for routes between African countries. There wasn't much chaos that I can think of. Current account deficit here in Kenya has narrowed to 6.9%. The nation is saying it's on tourism inflows. But the narrowing is all about crude oil, as I wrote over the weekend. Oil accounts for about a quarter of Kenya's annual import bill. According to latest data, Kenya imported 177.2 billion shillings worth of fuel and lubricants between January and September, a 34.66% drop from 271.2 billion it took in during the same period last year. That's a 94 billion shilling swing in the current account, nearly $1 billion. I'm saying since September, the price has fallen even further accelerating this trend. I said I expect that $1 billion boost to provide a substantial grassroots stimulus this year. But what's happened is the government has creamed off a great deal of this by raising taxes on the price and thereby improving its fiscal position, and this has blunted the price move at the pump. Other factors that are supporting the shilling are the bona fides of the central banker. The regime change at the Apex Bank has been extremely well received by the markets. Moving on, Nakumatt's profit drops to 305 million shillings after high costs. South African credit rating agency GCR shows the retailer posted a profit before tax of 305 million this year compared to 823 million in 2013. Long-term credit was retained at BB. Profits have been heavily eroded by rising interest charges associated with the large quantum of debt that has been used to fund growth. Moreover, net profit before taxes decreased from 823 to 305 million. Nakumatt's, look at this, total debt more than tripled in the 4 years to 15 billion shillings from 4.2 billion in 2011. Debt has been largely used to stock its new stores, having increased its branches to 58 across the region, with 43 in Kenya, 9 in Uganda, 4 in Tanzania and 2 in Rwanda. However, speaking to suppliers that I know, they have to wait 90, 180 days before they get paid. They've got to recycle their supplies at least twice or 3 times. So I'm surprised at the amount of debt build-up that we're seeing. Nakumatt's net interest cover was 1.2 times compared to 1.8 times in 2013. Management told the Business Daily it hoped to firm up matters with interested investors in the first quarter next year. There is no chance a strategic investor is going to take a minority position because of the ownership structure in Nakumatt. The debt load is close to stress. Kenya shilling 102.195, steady as anything. Teflon shilling, I called it. I am in fact looking for a move into double digits in the first quarter of 2016. Nairobi all share down 11.12% year to date, fell 0.54% yesterday. NSE 20 fell further 0.89% yesterday, back below 4,000. It's been playing around with that 4,000 mark for a while. Uchumi is targeting 5 billion shillings from a new strategic investor, and obviously they've already put their stall out. The stock exchange lost ground yesterday. EGADS, however, maintained its surge. It's up 15.29% over 2 sessions. Captoria T, that's up 12.209% over just 2 sessions. Safaricom unchanged, but it's up 16.37% since issuing its first half earnings in the first week of November. Uchumi up 5.32% at 890 and seems to be trading over 9 this morning. Nation Media is in correction mode, but remember it rallied 42.647% November 16th through December 17th, and then has corrected 7.73% since then. Equity Bank has been trading very, very heavily, traded 13.583 million shares yesterday. Previous 2 sessions, its cumulative total number of shares traded 24.156 million. And then Home Africa, interestingly, it was a real dead dog for a while, but it's up 44.44% over the space of just 4 weeks. I hope to get a podcast out tomorrow. If not, I do wish you a happy Christmas, and thanks for all the support you've given me all year.